In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Welcome, everyone, to the Daily Memphian Tigers Podcast with me, Greg Gaston, and my guest today, back again, Frank Bonner, Tigers football beat writer. We'll be joined a little bit later on when we talk Tigers basketball with Tigers basketball beat writer Parth Upadhyaya, and also my sidekick, Tim Buckley, the Daily Memphian deputy sports editor and senior writer. Gentlemen, we now know that the University of Memphis is staying home. They will play in the AutoZone Liberty Bowl game for the second time since 2017. And ironically, for the second time, they will face the Iowa State Cyclones from the Big 12. Frank, is this a best-case scenario if you're not going to win the conference and get the New Year's Six to get to this bowl game, which is normally not American versus Big 12. It's normally SEC versus Big 12. Is this the best-case scenario for Memphis?
It depends on whose vantage point it's from, right? I think best case scenario for the bowl, obviously, yes. Best case scenario for Memphis and the administration in terms of fan outcome, the answer is yes. Is it the best case scenario for the players? I don't know. I'm not too sure on that, right? I mean, part of it being in a bowl game is being able to go to a place that possibly you've never been before. So they're missing that. And so I do think all in all, it's a best case scenario for the program as a whole, but not so much for the players.
I'm with you 100%. If you had a chance to talk to any of the players, because I've always said you give them a shot at truth serum, they will more than likely, the bulk of them say, I don't want to play in my home stadium. I'd rather go somewhere else.
Yeah, and this is the second time. Because last year, remember, they played at SMU and turned around and had to play in that same stadium again last year in the First Responder Bowl. So this is kind of back-to-back years where they're playing in a stadium where they're familiar with.
Tim, how do you feel?
First of all, they don't even bring players close enough for us to give them truth serum. And secondly, I wouldn't know where do you pick that up? At like Circle K or where do you get truth serum?
Walgreens.
Oh, okay.
Come on now.
I will remember that.
Yes.
I guarantee you that they have been schooled, educated, advised that if they're not happy about staying home, to not say it on social media, to not say it publicly. I'm not as convinced as Frank that even though this is what it appears, and from all indications, the bowl wanted, I don't know if it necessarily is going to pay off ticket-wise as much as people are thinking that they are, because we talked about it last week. The circumstances were so different for that 2017 game. Iowa State might show. I don't know if however many tickets Memphis fans are going to purchase is going to add up to any more than if you brought in some other program. Now, the problem is you can argue that SMU wouldn't outsell them. You can argue that Tulane wouldn't sell them. I know it's in the contract that an AC team goes to the Liberty Bowl if the SEC can't provide enough teams, but I also know that contracts are like rules and they're meant to be broken, and I've seen bowl contracts torn up before to make things work. Could some wheeling and dealing have been done to bring in somebody from some other conference that would have outdrawn whatever Memphis is going to draw? Possibly. Was any of that going on behind the scenes? I don't know. But I'll be interested to see what the number is, the legit show-up number, not the announced number, because those ended up being distributed, and they distribute a lot of the giveaways. How that compares to 6 years ago.
Well, do you remember the legit number from 2017?
No. Oh, well, yeah, it was 50. What was it? 50.
That was the legit number.
50.
It was the number that was on there. So the number that I put in the story, which was 57 and change or whatever.
57,000 and change. I remember
that
was
was
huge.
on the Liberty Bowl or the AutoZone Liberty Bowl site.
Announced. That was the
announced crowd. Okay.
Well, that's what I ran with, was what the announced was.
Yeah, for those of us who covered it, obviously it was a big crowd, but I'm with you, Tim.
I saw a picture yesterday. The Liberty Bowl sent out the picture of the stadium. That thing looked pretty dang packed.
I can't imagine that they can draw that type of number. I don't see it. The SMU game, which was so pivotal, Frank, we talked about it leading up to that game. The crowd, quite frankly, although it wasn't horrible, we're not talking about UAB's crowds and Charlotte's crowds and so on and so forth, but I thought it was going to be up towards 40, and it wasn't. I can't imagine during the holidays, they've watched Memphis at home for a bunch of games this year, possibly cold, who knows what the weather will be right now, that they're going to show out with 35, 40,000. And with Iowa State, a bunch of those fans may say, been there, done that. I can't imagine it's going to come close to what it was 6 years ago.
No, I mean, 6 years ago was what it was, right? But I do think that whatever amount of fans show up to the AutoZone Liberty Bowl this year, it would have been less fans if Memphis had to travel somewhere else. So whatever that number is, I believe it would have been lower if they went somewhere else. And so I do think that, relative to whatever, their best outcome of fandom is to play in their home state.
But is it about the fans or about the players? Or is it about making money for the university? What's the proper answer to that?
Well, if you're going to go with the number one answer, it's none of the above. It's about TV. Keeping ESPN happy, keeping ratings
TV
happy.
matchups.
That's the first
Good
thing.
point. Mm-hmm.
The university, absolutely, that plays a part. And yes, they probably will end up with more on ticket sales by doing it here than if they did go to Boston or
without question.
or Annapolis. And the spin yesterday was, it's nice for our fans who can't normally travel to watch us play in a bowl game. But I don't know if that sells or not. We'll know when the tickets, are coming out. But do fans who are used to paying $10 if they want to watch the Tigers play during the regular season, are they going to be willing to shell out big bucks during a time when they're spending a bundle of money on a bunch of gifts that their kids probably aren't going to use for more than 2 days anyway, and go to a bowl game? I don't know.
Do Tigers fans get excited that they're playing a Big 12 team? It's not Texas. It's not Oklahoma. Of course, they're moving on to the SEC after this season. It's Iowa State. Is there going to be excitement that they get a chance to play a Big 12 team, a Power 5 conference team? I know the players are probably excited about that they're playing a Power 5 conference school, but are the fans going to go and do somersaults over Iowa State?
Well, I do think that, I don't know if they're doing somersaults or whatever, but I do think the fact that you're able to, because the conversation around this regular season has been Memphis hasn't been able to beat anybody that folks deemed worthy of beating. They lost to Missouri, Tulane, SMU. And so this is another chance for that inside that locker room and for some of the fan base to say, hey, I know it's a bowl game, but they went up against a Big 12 team in Iowa State. And if they win, you can hang your hat on the fact that you beat a team that some folks would deem worth beating.
But I think what Greg is asking, and he says it much nicer than I am, because he is not much nicer than I am.
A little bit.
I think what he's asking is, does it count? Yeah, it's a Big 12 team, but it's Iowa State. Yeah, it's a Big 12 team, but it's 7-5 Iowa State.
It's an exhibition as well. How much do we put into a win in a bowl game? Now, obviously, a school's going to hang its hat on it, but which players are going to play, who's going to opt out. We always get to this conversation every year in the postseason about bowl games.
Yeah, so does it count as much as a regular season game or even a conference championship game? No. But 2-3 years from now, when you look back on the season, if they win, you're going to remember it as a 10-win season. Yeah. And so does it count? It absolutely counts in terms of how the season will be remembered record-wise.
Right.
Because it's a 10-win season, and a 10-win season that ended with beating a Big 12 team. So
and it would only be the fourth time in history.
Right, and the only way to get there is to win the bowl game. So I do think there is still some things riding on this game from a milestone perspective, which is why I think Memphis, in my opinion, should be the one getting up for this game a little bit more than Iowa State, because they are chasing that 10-win season.
If they win, they're not going to not brag on it. Double negative and a qualifier, but I agree.
What do you score in Scrabble for that? Is that the word? What's the name of the game? Scrabble?
Q gets you like 8 points.
Yeah, I've never played Scrabble in my life.
You never played Scrabble?
Never. So I don't know what
I'll beat you at Scrabble some night.
Let me ask you this. We just had the, I'm sure you would, the American Conference Championship game won by SMU in New Orleans against Tulane. They seem to, Tulane, play. I mean, offensively, they were challenged by SMU. They couldn't score. Memphis scored 34 against SMU. Boise State went on to win the Mountain West Championship and crushed UNLV. Is that a little extra as we look back at the season that Memphis had? They lost to SMU, but it was a 4-point loss. They beat Boise State. Did they get a little extra now? A little extra in the stocking for Christmas?
I mean, so the Boise State win looks better, right? I think you only have this conversation when it's a team that you beat, right? So to the Boise State's standpoint, yes, that win looks better. I don't know if a loss can look any better than what it already did. Yeah. If they would have beat those teams, then those wins would have looked better. But the losses are like we already knew what those losses were before those games were played.
Right.
We knew Missouri was a good team. We knew Tulane was one of the best teams in the conference, and we knew SMU was one of the best teams in the conference. So from a loss standpoint, I don't know if that moves the needle any. But from a win standpoint, beating Boise State, I think it does make that win even better.
How about this? Full circle for Memphis. Obviously, a big story away from the actual games is the whole deal with the refurbishment of Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium, the whole situation now where it looks like the school will run the show, run everything that's happening at that stadium, including the Southern Heritage Classic, the AutoZone Liberty Bowl game, which we've been talking about. They will be tenants of the University of Memphis. How about this? That the Memphis Tigers will actually play in the final game, presumably, as long as, knock on wood, everything goes according to plan. They will play in that last game before they go ahead and do all the renovations. That's pretty cool, I think.
First of all, for $220 million, I want more than a refurbishment. Like, knock down some walls. Build a bathroom. Put an island in the kitchen.
Fix
I want more
the
than
press box. Although it's going to be on the other side.
Well, temporary. Well, is it that temporarily, or
No.
is that going to be
No.
full-time?
No, they're
moving
moving that to the other side.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Which I think will also be good for, not to get on a tangent, but USFL and the Showboats getting that
Television.
Television.
The camera's facing the home side.
Always comes back to television.
Well, that's what all this is for. Television money. I mean, that's what conference realignment is about, bowl games, all that.
But I think it's kind of cool. They're playing the
it's-
last game, and then they're going to knock down walls, a couple of days later?
But to my point, right? Only if you win the game. Because if you lose, then it's like, oh, you know, the last hoorah, whatever, it was a loss.
I also don't think, look, nobody's going to. If it was the last game in the stadium before they imploded it and they built a new one on campus, yeah, that's huge. They're gonna fix half the stadium.
It's still the same stadium.
Yeah.
But you're putting a lot more importance on this game as opposed to maybe some other people.
Just for chasing the 10 win, right? I do think
That's big.
Chasing the 10 win season is big, especially in a year where you didn't make it to the conference championship. I do think being able to hang your hat on a 10 win season softens the blow a little bit. And so for that reason, that's why I said I think it's a lot bigger for Memphis than it is Iowa State, because Iowa State's just chasing an 8-win season, which doesn't really mean a whole lot. For Memphis, 10 wins is 10 wins.
And you also want to win at least one of the 4 games that on paper, in theory, you weren't supposed to win.
Right. What do you think the line will be? Is the line out already? I don't think it's out yet, is it?
I'm going to look now.
Well, while you're trying to look, Tim, what would be your guess? Mr. Vegas?
I have no earthly clue. No idea. Memphis is at home. I guess you give them a little bit there.
Yeah, Iowa State was 7-5. They did have a win off the top of my head over Oklahoma State, who made it to the Big 12 championship game. They had a few good wins. They were up and down. I'm
going to go. I'm just going to guess what Vegas has. Just a pure guess. Iowa State at 3.5 favorite.
I'll say Iowa. I think you're on to something. I think it's Iowa State by 3.
And I haven't looked. I haven't cheated.
So I'm on Action Network as of 1:16 on December 4th. They have the line at 6.5
for Iowa State.
Negative 6.5 for Iowa State.
And the 3 times that Memphis has been an underdog this year, correct me if I'm wrong, right? 3 games they lost, right?
Yes.
They were underdogs in all 3. The other 9, they were a favorite.
Yeah, right. And so this is
They're trying to buck the trend here.
Yeah, they're trying to win a game where they're
so they're not giving the Tigers much credit for being at home.
No, because usually that's 3 points.
I mean, Iowa State beat him at home in the last AutoZone.
I figured Iowa State a touchdown favorite, but give them 3 or so for being at home.
Here's the thing. This Memphis team, talented, but certainly not as talented as the 2017. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know this Iowa State team. I haven't yet looked into them. 7-5, solid, not great, not spectacular. So I don't know if they're as good as the 2017. But I would say the Memphis team this year, very good team, not as good as 17.
Yeah, but also they went 7-5 in the Big 12, right? So they beat a team like Oklahoma State. Now they also lost to Ohio, but 7-5 in the Big 12 looks a little different than a 7-5 in the American.
Don't you go sliding the Bobcats?
I think it helps Memphis that you got a quarterback who cares about being there and is going to come back. Like this one will matter to Seth Hannigan. You got a receiver who cares about being there and is going to be back in Rock Taylor. You got another receiver, Joe Skates, who has a little bit of a vested interest in the game because he's playing against his former team and some of his old buddies.
Some good story.
You've got a starting running back who has a vested interest because he wants to show out for the NFL guys, Blake Watson. And you got a defense that has a point to prove and, might be playing to protect their own starting jobs, their own backup jobs, their coaches, the faith that they have in the coaches and vice versa. You got a defense that needs to show something.
Are you saying that you think a bad performance would nail the coffin for a potential defensive coordinator move? Or are you saying that they need to play really well in this bowl game? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that who knows what's going to happen in that regard, but it wouldn't hurt Matt Barnes for his defense to show up against Iowa State.
I would say, me personally, I think whatever decision is made on that end has already been made.
Yeah.
No matter what happens in the bowl.
And if it's been made, then that leans toward they're not making any changes because you don't keep that group around for a bowl game. You cut ties early before the bowl game. You let the GAs handle the defense in the bowl game. You give the old guy a chance to go out and find a new job, and you give yourself time
That's a good point.
to do the interviews or to, claim your guy who maybe is on is maybe a co-coordinator and you want him to be your coordinator, or maybe he's the coordinator on a team that had an incredible defense but didn't go into bowl game because his offense sucks or whatever.
Especially if the portal open.
If you've made up absolutely, because they're going to want to bring in their own guys out of the portal.
Right.
If you've made up your mind on that already, you would have done it already is my hunch, which leads me to believe that it leans more toward coming back. But in this day and age, it used to be like you always knew right around, there's like a 10-day window where it went crazy with the coaching carousel. Now it's just like everything else in college football, college sports. It's a free-for-all.
Because my thing with that is what difference does it make? Are you really hinging a decision on one bowl game, whether that performance ended up being good or bad? What difference does that
That's why
one bowl game make?
I think you're right. I think if a decision is going to be made about his status, it's already been made.
But
good or bad.
To be fair, and I hear what you're saying, and that's why I said it, only that it wouldn't hurt him for that defense to show up. But if you're getting outside influence, outside pressure to make a change, I don't know if that's the case or not, but if you are, and then your defense gives up 59 points in a bowl game, you're getting more pressure.
Yeah, but you know how bowl games are as far as fan reaction. If they give up a bunch of points and yards, then they're going to say, man, it's the same old Memphis defense. They should have got rid of the DC and all that. If they stymie them, they're going to say Iowa State, they didn't care to play.
It was a bowl game.
It was a bowl game.
But I'm lose situation.
I'm not talking about fan pressure, though.
No, but sometimes changes are made because of fan.
Every head coach has bosses.
Right.
And sometimes the bosses aren't even employed by the university.
And sometimes they listen to the fans. If the fans say, listen, it was 9 wins. That's fantastic. But you know what? That defense needs to get better. You really need to make a change. Now, 1 guy, 2 guys, 3 fans are not going to change the minds of an athletic director. But all of a sudden, that noise gets loud.
But if you listen to the fans, it wouldn't just be one defensive coach who
would be. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
By the way, speaking of coaches, Frank, have you heard anything yet on a possible contract extension, raise, one or the other, both for Ryan Silverfield?
I mean, no, but based on speculation, after a 9-3 season, you've got to do some type of extension. Otherwise, what message are you sending to any other potential candidate if you're thinking about moving on down the line after a guy wins 9 games? I mean, what else would you do to a coach after he wins?
You mean the message you'd be sending to a future coach for Memphis?
Well, if you want to keep him, you extend him.
But are they clamoring to are schools clamoring to hire him right now? It's all about supply and demand, is it not?
No, nobody, Frank, is going to say, man, they fired that 9-win coach. You know what? I'm a coach in the Sun Belt Conference making $500,000 a year. I'm not going to take that Memphis job because they fired their 9-win coach. If I'm a coordinator who clamors to be a head coach, I'm not going to say, you know what, I'm going to turn that job down because I'm going to go cash the check and take care of my family. Because you get a 3-4 year contract paying that kind of money, you're kind of sitting pretty compared to what you're making right now in all likelihood.
You're going to that type of coach, you're just going to be happy with the coach that you have in Ryan Silverfield.
They're not going to go hire a Power 5 head coach.
Which is why, Ryan Silverfield, in my opinion, is your guy.
Right. Look, your point is well taken. But I think in this day and age of the portal, where players leave each and every year at the drop of a hat, I don't think you have to show any player, hey, the coach is under contract for 4+ years. That was in the old days. That's not happening now. My point is this. If you feel that Ryan is your guy, you reward him for a 9-win, possibly 10-win season. If you don't think you're going to lose him to anybody, if you don't think he really did a good enough job, there's nothing that says you have to give the extension now because you're not needing to prove it to recruits that you're here under contract for 4+ years.
Right. But and to your point, there is a positive of waiting for both sides, right? Obviously there's a positive on the Memphis side for waiting to see if Ryan can duplicate. And if you're on Ryan Silverfield's side, there's a positive to waiting in terms of being able to possibly get more money after next year, depending on how next year goes.
Mm-hmm.
So I get the waiting part, but Memphis is trying to do a lot between still chasing after a Power 5 conference. Now you've got this stadium renovation stuff going on. You don't want to also have your head coach sitting in limbo about an extension on top of that.
It's nice.
Fair point.
It's nice to show stability.
Fair point. Yes,
that's fair.
Yeah.
Reward him if you feel. And I think it was a really good season, so I would reward him. I'm just saying now in this day and age, you don't have to show recruits, oh, he's under contract for 4 or 5 years, because these recruits, once they go to a school after 1 year, they're looking for greener pastures.
Yeah, I think it's less about the recruits and more about what the Memphis athletic program is trying to do long-term, big picture.
And I take your point, Frank, that it leans toward Ryan staying, you would think, because of all those things that you're talking about. If you're not going to go make a super splashy hire, which I don't think they're in position to do right now. But my point is, if you are somebody who is offered the job, especially if you're not splashy, the fact that they got rid of a 9-win coach is not going to make you hesitate to jump and grab that job.
Frank, any other names? Obviously, the Tevin Carters, the Davian Carters, we've heard about them. Seth going to social media over the past weekend saying he's coming back for another year. Any word on players that may be hitting this portal now that it's open, that will not participate in the bowl game? Any rumblings?
No. I mean, obviously, the big hitters that we've talked about, right? Seth, Rock. I mean, those. My assumption is that those guys will play. Now, you will probably have some, maybe, second, third team guys that may enter the portal or not play or whatever. But
but your frontline guys,
I think you've already lost, a guy like Davion Carter or whatever. I think any of your frontline guys that would have left before the portal would have left by now, maybe.
And the fact that Hennigan is coming back helps you keep, I would think, most of your receiving core, tight end group, in line. They don't have a tight end like they did who's going to go to an SEC school, like Priestcorn did last season.
Right.
So I don't think you have any major concerns there. The one big movement on the I think the rest of the offense, it seems at this point, like, is intact. Obviously, Blake Watson's not a worry because he's gone anyway.
Right.
Maybe one of the running backs who didn't get enough playing time last year.
There's a running back situation going on or could be going on or whatever the case may be in terms of – but, at Memphis, there's always a running back situation in terms of pecking order and all that, at least since I've been on the beat. But last year, Memphis went into the bowl game having a lot of its team intact and then came out of the bowl game and pieces started to leave. And so I wonder what's going to happen after the bowl game versus what's going to happen heading into the bowl game. I mean, I think that is the bigger question.
I'm not a former player, but it still amazes me how many players opt out of playing in the bowl game. You work all season long. You want to reap the rewards of the bowl game, the stuff you get with the swag bag and all that stuff, all the events that coincide with it, and players drop off. I do understand. I'm not saying I agree with it. The Caleb Williams of the world, and I don't think he's made a decision yet. Those kind of guys who opt out of playing in a bowl game, has he made a decision yet?
I think somebody reported that Lincoln Riley said that he was not.
He was going to play?
He was
not going
to play.
So again, I can't get into their shoes, right?
Yeah, he's
not going to play.
He's not going to play.
Again, you're talking about a guy who could be the number one overall pick. But for most players out there, those that decide they're not going to play, I don't get it. I just don't get it. You work,
but Caleb Williams is going to make like $1 jillion. He's not caring.
No, Caleb, I get. I said those other players that aren't Caleb Williams or first round picks.
But I think part of it is because there's too many bowls, and so the idea of playing in a bowl game has been watered down, right? And so depending on the bowl, players make their decision on if they want to opt out or whatever. You gotta. I mean, the bowls aren't going to get cut. It's too much money to be made. But if you really want to prevent players from opting out at this rate, you've got to cut some of these bowls and make it more of a reward.
Of an accomplishment, right?
If you were a team that was hoping for a 9 or 10 win season and then you mess around and go 6-6, you don't really care to play in the 6-6 bowl game.
Right.
Have you ever been in one of those gift suites, though?
What?
Have you been in one of the gift suites?
No, I have not.
Where they line up all the stuff? No, I never have.
The players, they literally, they'll put them in a little conference room in a hotel or whatever, and they literally go up and down and they pick up their gifts. It's like, give me the headphones and give me the one time the Raging Cajuns went to the New Orleans Bowl. I went in the gift suite and I was like watching them do it, and the one kid's like, should I get the recliner for my dad? Well, you know what? That's not going to be my main gift. So give me the recliner. Like, are you getting the Yeti cooler? Yeah, give me 2 of the Yeti coolers.
What was the old TV show? It may be the beginning of Wheel of Fortune, which has become a phenomenon. It could be something else where at the very end they had like money and the people would go, give me the porcelain dog for $80. I'll take the rest on a gift certificate. That's what it is. You're going in, give me this, give me the recliner, give me that. All right. We're going to have plenty of time in future podcasts to talk about next year. There's a lot of news still to happen. There's a lot of moves still to be made. But I want to ask you this before we get out of here. Willie Fritz gone, leaves Tulane, takes the Houston job. He's out of the conference. We know SMU is going to the ACC. Frank Harris, 7th year, just completed his 7th year of quarterbacking at UTSA. He has finally used up his eligibility unless some other cockamamie thing happens. The point I'm trying to make is Memphis has a 4-year starting quarterback coming back. It will be his 4th year. There can't be too many of them around the country. Gentlemen, should Memphis be the favorite going into next year right now, not knowing all the stuff that can happen? But should Memphis be the favorite in the American Conference?
Yeah, but before I answer that, let me just run down some of the offers that Davion Carter has gotten based on his Twitter. Texas Tech, Boston College, and Southern Miss. So his portal action is moving pretty quickly.
Well, you're not going to Southern Miss.
No, right?
You're going to a Power 5 conference.
Yeah, right. But he announced offer from Texas Tech, Boston. So he's getting some Power 5
because
offer.
Offensive linemen are so needed. They're going to be able to get that type of money. Quarterbacks, offensive linemen. All right.
But
my question.
Actually, the Southern Miss was a retweet. That wasn't his. So Southern Miss wasn't on it. Sorry. It's he's
one of these
Texas
things doesn't
Tech
sound like
and,
the other.
and Boston College. Yeah. Anyway, to your point, yes, Memphis will be, I think, should be the favorite heading into next season. To your points, UTSA is going to take a dip. No Frank Harris, right? We know that Tulane is expected to take a dip. You lost your coach.
And is Pratt coming back? Who knows? He may follow him to Houston.
Right. And then SMU is no longer in the conference. What other team would you put as a favorite ahead of Memphis? I don't see any other team that you would even bring to the table to be picked over them.
Tim?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, who else has a fourth-year starting quarterback returning off of a 9-win, maybe 10-win team? Losing Willie Fritz is he's a good coach. That's going to hurt Tulane. Franco Harris was one of the great all-time players in football history. Oh, wait, that was Franco. But Frank Harris, he was wondering what you're doing. He was good too.
Really good. He was a really good college quarterback.
Yeah, and that's a tough program. I mean, I'm sure they're going to be up there in the conversation if they have even a halfway decent guy coming in behind him because they're consistent. But yeah, absolutely. If Memphis is not picked number one in the preseason coaches poll, either something crazy will have happened in the offseason with portal stuff and all that, or I'll be shocked.
Well, the preseason one is the media one.
Yeah, well, we never get it right anyway, so whatever.
But I also don't think any other team is going to be as motivated or in most desperate need to win the title other than Memphis.
Well, there'll be pressure on Coach Silverfield. You're going to look at a schedule that will include Florida State, non-conference, even a Troy team that comes to Memphis that's really, really good. But the conference schedule will be tougher because this year, let's be honest, they got a cakewalk. They never played UTSA. They had home games against SMU and Tulane. But again,
it wasn't as easy as SMU's conference schedule.
Right, but SMU's gone, so you don't count them anymore. How much improvement will we see from the likes of Florida Atlantic, from Charlotte, from UAB? But that's something we'll tackle in the future. But I'm with you guys.
Why is it that you play cupcakes, but then if you don't play any good, it's a cake walk?
A lot of bakery stuff, a lot of bakery connotations here with this. But hopefully Memphis will be baking a little bit on the 30th, or is it the 29th? 29th is the date for the AutoZone Liberty Bowl game. Again, Memphis, Iowa State in the big game. We'll talk about that before we get to the game with Frank, with Tim. We'll get predictions from both. We'll have more information on rosters and things of that nature as we move along. Frank, Tim, thank you so much.
Here's to good weather for the Liberty Bowl.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Parth Upadhyaya now joins myself and Tim as we talk Tigers basketball. And the Tigers basketball team went down to Oxford, their only game since coming back from the Bahamas. And unfortunately, they fall to Ole Miss again, 80-77. And I say again because Memphis has had all types of issues in Oxford. Parth, your initial response to the 3-point loss?
It's a missed opportunity, and it's not because, Ole Miss played well, right? You had Murray and Morrell. Both of those guys went off. Flanagan went off. But I say it should hurt more for Memphis is because they got in their own way, with baffling coaching decisions. These veteran players that just lack situational awareness. I mean, it's a head scratcher.
Ole Miss led for about 4.5 minutes, but they led when it was the most important. And, of course, that was at the end of the game. So, Tim, a tough one. This is one I thought that Memphis really needed to win. It doesn't mean that their season is over by any stretch of the imagination, but you don't have a lot of these opportunities, and to go down and win one on the road that was right there for the taking, they let it slip through their fingers.
Yeah, they should have won. I mean, they controlled that game for most of it. They were not always comfortably ahead, but they seemed to just be the better team on the floor for more than 30 minutes, certainly. and they just kind of gave it away at the end. I wasn't as hung up on having to win it just because they have so many other opportunities where they can make up for it. And if you go, on a little 4 or 5 game win streak going into Christmas time or going into New Year's, you soften the blow of losing there. But if you throw that in then with, a loss to the Texas A&Ms and the Clemsons and whoever else is of the world that's left on your schedule,
right,
then yeah, it does hurt.
Right. 2 straight losses now after losing the game against Villanova in the championship round in the Battle for Atlantis. What are the major reasons why they lost this game? And then we'll kind of break them down. Parth, let me start with you. Why did they lose this game?
Yeah, aside from the decision-making and the strategic stuff, the three-pointers, I think they went like 3 for 18 from 3. On the other end of the floor, Ole Miss goes 11 for 22. So that's I think it was a 24-point differential. I did the math earlier. And then you look at the turnovers. They turned the ball over 15, 16 times. Just the first half alone, Ole Miss scores 11 points off of those turnovers. That first half, they could have put the game away in the first half. That's the part that's baffling. They led by 7 at the break, but the only reason Ole Miss was even around, in my opinion, is because of those turnovers.
It seems like it's a glaring problem in their perimeter defense. They're allowing teams to shoot threes, get wide open threes, and hit a high percentage of them.
Absolutely. I think it's been, they've played 7 games. I want to say 3 or 4 games they've let their opponents score or shoot rather over 37% from the 3. Villanova drills 13 threes on them, and you got 8 days to prepare. You hope that problem gets kind of shored up, tightened up, but obviously it had not.
Tim, Penny hangs his hat on defense. Last year, I thought they took a mini step backwards. They weren't as good as they were with previous teams. This year, they're still trying to find their way defensively. There's a lot of situations out there where there's miscommunication, guys not in the right position. So I know this is something they're going to be fighting real hard in practice to get to, but right now that defense is lacking a bit.
Yeah, and it was interesting because when I asked him about Jordan Brown's issues, he talked about how they've been playing some different defenses in practice, and they just haven't brought it out yet. And Rick Stansbury, when at the end of his 3 games while Penny was serving the suspension there, was talking about, well, yeah, we have some other defenses we've been working on, but we didn't want to show them before going to the Bahamas. Well, if you got it up your sleeve now, no better time than the present
exactly.
to pull it out, because they need to do something. They need to figure out how to protect Jordan Brown from foul trouble, which I thought was one of their biggest issues in Oxford. They need to figure out a way to get Jordan Brown going, which I think was one of the biggest problems in Oxford and in the trip too. He didn't. Now some of it was matchup stuff. I'll grant that, which I can go. Well, and I will go off on that. Some of it was matchups, and I understand that in the Bahamas, but he didn't play more than 12 minutes in any of those 3 games. One game was because he got 2 quick fouls. The other one maybe was matchups. But I always say, if you believe in your people, why do coaches always say, well, they went small on us, and we had a match up against them, and that's why we lost? Well, if that means you had your good big guys sitting there, why don't you control the matchup?
You dictate what happens on the court.
You go big and make them play big against you.
Jordan Brown's played himself off the floor. I mean, to your point.
He had 2 fouls quickly in Oxford, too.
Yeah,
he did.
In less than 90 seconds.
Yes.
18:37 in was when he picked up his second.
And then had no more, though.
Yeah.
Which is
but he played 6 minutes.
Exactly. And that's the point, right?
And Penny said also that he has to start trusting him more. But
Jordan, hard to trust a guy who's on the bench.
Well, but
I know.
By that he means
I know what he
need to
means,
put him in
but
and
still
ride him a little bit even when he's struggling. But he needs to get his motor revved. And Jordan Brown doesn't always play with the revved motor. There's times when he kind of goes into la-la land. So and I know that because I watched him play for the Raging Cajuns.
But they didn't lose this game because in this particular game they didn't lose. And you're right about Jordan Brown because I bring it up every week. It's an issue. But they didn't. Well, they didn't lose because Malcolm Dandridge stepped in.
I thought Malcolm
and did
was
a great job in replacing Malcolm.
Yeah, but even he struggled a little bit. He admitted himself. He had 3 turnovers. He wasn't perfect.
But he's not. He's never perfect. That's Malco.
But they probably had to rely on him for more minutes than
Too much.
than was ideal.
That's fair.
If they could have gotten everything they got out of Melko in less time and more out of Jordan Brown in the time that Malcolm Dandridge didn't get, then they probably walk away with the win. But their other two issues I thought in that game were David Jones.
Right.
David Jones didn't take
yes.
a shot in the last 5 minutes. He scored 16 out of his whatever it was, 22 that he finished with in the first half. He did not take a shot in the last, what did you say it was?
550.
550. I knew it was in the
Barely
last 5
touched the
minutes,
ball.
550.
And the other problem you're going to bring up is Quinterly.
Well,
Right?
Those go hand in hand. Those go hand in hand.
Okay.
Yeah, it does go. It goes hand in hand. But
Okay, let's break it down. Let's start with Jones. Penny Hardaway took the blame after the game. Okay, it's nice to, take the bullets for your team, but it was his mistake. He didn't, whatever the reason is. Now, I don't know if he didn't communicate that or this was Quinterly and other guys, for whatever reason, playing hero ball, getting away from David Jones. David Jones, this season to this point, is the guy. When you need a bucket, you go to David Jones. They're in a tight game, a game that's a one-possession game when it's all said and done, and he doesn't get a shot for the last 5 minutes and 50 seconds. That is unacceptable.
It makes no sense, and Penny was asked about it after the game, and his explanation was that he wanted to put the ball in JQ's hands, Quinterly's hands, and have him, go downhill off ball screens and then make decisions from there. But the problem is Quinterly, he shot the ball, dribbled the heck out of the ball and then shot it well more than he did assist, right? He didn't even look to facilitate. Memphis's final 10 shots, Quinterly took 5,
And what was his final numbers shooting wise? He really struggled with the shot.
He did. I believe he was 2 for 12.
2 for 12.
Had 6 or 7 points, mostly from the free throw line there. Did have 6 assists, but
this is when a veteran point guard that you brought in needs to make the right play, the right decision. I know on that final play, Tim, Penny talked about having Ashton open in the corner. He was wide open in the corner for the 3, and instead Quinterly takes the off balance. It just didn't make sense from a veteran player that Quinterly tried to play hero ball. Let's be honest.
And for listeners at home, Greg was actually doing the dribbling motion. He kind of looked like remember when he had the yo-yo and you did walk the dog. And you just kind of had to walk the dog down there.
I did.
Then if you were really crazy, you brought it back up and you did the cradle
Around the world.
Oh yeah,
around the world. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I could never do any of that. No
What, the
dog
yo-yo?
walking around the world, none of that.
Oh,
No, I tried.
Yeah,
Trust.
as a
I'll
kid,
take
I was
the
pretty good with
point.
the yo-yo. But I think it's the two glaring problems. Again, Jordan Brown is a problem so far this season. It's been a problem. But in this particular game, it's Penny going away for whatever reason from David Jones. And then the other one is Quinterly. Again, Quinterly not making the right plays. Quinterly trying to play hero ball. And this is one they should have won.
I'll throw one more out there. I thought Ole Miss kind of figured out Memphis in the second half. They made the adjustments. They were, doing what they should against the pick and roll, and I didn't see a counter adjustment from Memphis to do something different on offense once it looked like Ole Miss had figured them out.
Even defensively, Murray, Flanagan, Morrell, those guys were, no matter who Memphis put on them, right? They were cooking these guys one-on-one, absolutely cooking them. And there was no adjustment in terms of going, maybe going zone or something had to change, right? No, because no matter who you threw on them, these guys were going to get a bucket.
I have been asked about that as well. Why no adjustments to go to a zone?
Right.
When those guys started to really heat up and those 3 destroyed, basically those 3 guys won the game. Those 3 guys.
Nobody else scored more than 8. Yeah,
and you knew Morrell was going to step up because he's a Memphian and he always does.
6 of 7 from 3.
You have to adjust. Caleb Mills shut down the Missouri scorer in the second half, right? So I don't know what they did with Caleb in this particular game, but there were 3 of them. That if there's 3 of them that's torching, that's when you have to go to a zone.
And I guess that's part of what that obviously is what he's referencing when he says we haven't, we don't do it in practice, but we haven't brought it out yet. So.
Right.
It's it's time. they need to show something else.
He called the timeout, and after the game, he said, "I do it a million times." I'm paraphrasing here, whatever.
Yeah.
I know he said he wasn't upset with that. So he'll take the blame for the David Jones thing, which is a big blame to take. But he said, I'd call that timeout any day of the week. Here's the thing: they called the timeout to set up a defense to get a couple of guys. I think he said a breather. And then they come out and they gave up a 3. and then they did not have that timeout in the back pocket to design a better play and get a better shot than what they were able to get.
He took out Ashton. I mean, that's worth noting. He said that after the game. He said he wanted to take out Ashton and put Jalen Young in, who he believes is the best on-ball defender. And I kind of, I agree with that statement.
Better than Mills?
He's right up there. Jalen Young and Caleb Mills, I think, are comparable on-ball defenders. So he wanted to take Ashton out, who's been as great of a shooter as he's been. He's been a defensive liability, and put Jalen Young in.
The other thing that I think you need to look at is there's a lot of talk early in the season. And right now we're picking apart a team that still is
sure.
5 and 2.
Yeah, nobody is here saying that they're a bad team.
There was a lot of talk early in the season about this team has tons of scores, got shooting scores, lots of it, lots of depth. If you are going to go away from David Jones, some of those other scorers have to show up. And either they need to show up more or do you wonder, do they maybe not have as many scorers or as much scoring depth as it seemed like they had going into the season?
That's fair. Now, also, Jaquan Walton got hurt. How much of a factor was that?
I think it was a pretty sizable factor. I mean, this is just a stat in a vacuum, right? Like, it doesn't mean everything. It's not the end-all, be-all, but Jaquan Walton was second in plus-minus, and then, he gets hit in the head. Penny said he was good to go with about 1 minute and 30 seconds, I believe he said, left, and he just didn't want to put him back in the game cold, which is, totally reasonable. Everything else that was decided, done, is not.
And I think that absence was largely overlooked and perhaps a different outcome if he goes the whole way.
In this game, in this particular game, was Ole Miss.
Parth looks like he's not buying it.
Yeah, and I think
Go ahead.
Look,
retort.
If you're Memphis, right? If you're the Memphis Tigers, who were this dark horse Final Four team, you've assembled the freaking Avengers of the transfer portal. Like, Jaquan Walton is the difference between winning at Ole Miss. Ole Miss is, a good team, but by no means a great team.
But you're
no
better
means.
with Jaquan Walton on the floor than
Of course.
Yes.
in the locker room.
But look at the depth. They've been bragging about.
One finger or two.
But was Ole
Sure.
Miss, forget about talent. Okay, sometimes it's not always the best talent, right? Was Ole Miss the more physical team, both physically with bodies and then mentally were they the tougher team?
Ole Miss was not the more physical team. That's the
okay.
problem. Memphis has had rebounding struggles, throughout this young season. They come into Oxford, out-rebound Ole Miss, I think 42-39, and just destroy them on the offensive glass. Memphis had, I believe, 18 second chance points to Ole Miss's 10.
Which was nice to see, right?
Exactly. So if you're checking those boxes off that have been weaknesses through the first 6 games and you still don't win, and we're sitting here talking about it, right? The on-court coaching decisions, the strategy stuff. I think that's the number one reason we can point to about the when it comes to the loss.
And Chris Beard, I thought, coached soundly in the last 5 minutes. I think he's one of the better, if not really higher upper echelon tactician type coaches, and I think that showed.
You just beat me to it. I was going to say I don't think there's any harm. I don't think it's a failure on Penny's part that he may have been outcoached down the stretch, because guess what? A lot of coaches are outcoached by Chris Beard.
He's one of the best in the game.
And Ole Miss, despite everything that happened away from the court, they're ecstatic to have a guy that good. With that said, though, Memphis controlled the game for the most part. You guys were there. They should have won the game. They did not win the game. Now, today, Tuesday, as we tape this, the net rankings have come out for the first time this year. The basketball net rankings are basically what determine the NCAA tournament. And they'll come out, I think, daily from here on.
Yes.
So they now have enough data to go ahead and put this together. And I think Memphis was 71, Parth, today?
They were.
Number 71.
The Tigers are 71.
Lower than what you thought they would be?
Definitely lower than, what I thought they would be. Did I think they'd be a top 35, top 40 team? No, but 71's definitely even with my estimation, my imagination, even a bit low.
What do you think? You're not a big numbers guy, but I expected with their. How many do you have that right in front of you as far as quad 1, quad 2, quad 3?
I do.
I take exception to that. I am a big numbers guy. I'm looking at we're 15 minutes and 55 seconds in, and I've not heard one Ken Palm reference yet. That's huge.
Ken Palm's my man. Ken Palm's my man. He comes on my radio show.
Ken Pomeroy, yeah.
Yeah, but
he is the man.
But net rankings are what it's about today because they came out for the first time. So Memphis
the
right
equivalent
now.
Of CFP.
Yes. Memphis right now, what do they have as far as the quads?
They've got no quad 1 wins, and, I'll keep going down it, but I remember, and I'm not obviously picking at anybody, but, when Memphis beat Mizzou, there were a lot of fans and even some of the players that were saying, oh, this is a quad 1. I'm like, let's slow down a little bit. We had no idea what Mizzou was.
Right.
And sure enough, I think Mizzou's sitting outside the top 100. That's not a, it's not a really
Arkansas's not a quad
win.
1 because it was neutral?
Guess what? Arkansas is a quad 3.
Oh, my.
Arkansas is 117 in the net.
So what are they? Give me the breakdown.
Right. So they have no quad 1 wins. Their only quad 1 opportunity was Villanova, which they, kind of got crushed, right? And even Villanova is sitting at 50th. That means that if, they lose another game to another, I don't know, they've lost to Drexel
They've lost to
and
Penn,
St.
Drexel,
Joseph.
and St. Joe's.
All those, Big Five is that what they call it over there in
Right.
Philly? Yeah.
Right.
No,
Drexel's first year in the Big Five, but yes.
So I guess it's the 6 now, Big 6?
It should be. They're not going to change that name.
Well, yeah. Okay. So Villanova's, taking some bad losses. If they take 1 or 2 more, or even if they take a what we deem to be a decent loss, that could very well be a quad 2 right there. So that's quad 1, 0-1. Quad 2, they've got 2 wins, 1 loss. 2 wins being Michigan, Missouri, the loss being Ole Miss just this Saturday. Quad 3, they've got the win over Arkansas, and quad 4, obviously Jackson State, Alabama State. They took care of business there.
Okay. As Tim said earlier, you forget about the Ole Miss loss if they can go on this run. We know what's coming up. Wednesday, tomorrow, Richmond. And actually, we're taping today is Monday. I think I said Tuesday earlier, so Parth will be on a plane tomorrow.
I will. Yep.
He'll be heading to Richmond for the VCU game. Sunday in College Station, Texas against Texas A&M. We know Virginia's coming up. Clemson's coming up. Big games at home. Again, these are home games. You're expected to win. But really, a VCU win, what is that going to be? A quad 3?
Yeah.
Right now, VCU just lost earlier in the year to McNeese.
It was McNeese, because I remember Will
Right.
Wade. People were hyping up
Yeah,
Will Wade for that
former
win.
LSU head coach.
Yep.
You have Vanderbilt on the schedule. Vanderbilt is bad. Vanderbilt right now.
Vanderbilt's awful.
Their net
Like,
ranking
bad is an
is really,
understatement.
really bad. So, yes, there are some opportunities, but not as many as people think. And then when you get into the conference, Florida Atlantic right now would be the top. They have 6 chances right now.
That's
for
a good
quad 1
basketball
wins.
team.
2 of them are Florida Atlantic.
Yes.
They're the best. They're like number 11.
They're 11th, in the net.
That's it. Everything else in the conference, if you lose, crushes you. If you win, you were expected to win.
People don't think about it like this because they look at the brand, right? Like Vanderbilt. But Vanderbilt and Austin Peay are actually back-to-back in the net. Vanderbilt being 276, Austin Peay being 277. Those are both not going to move the needle at all.
Tim, let me ask you this. And look, again, we're not numbers people. We're not Ken Pomeroy. But let's say you lose at A&M. And Florida Atlantic, by the way, beat them, scored like 95 or 96 against them.
Yep.
You beat VCU. You lose to A&M. You split Clemson and Virginia. All right? You beat Vanderbilt. You beat Austin Peay. And then you get in the conference play. You split Florida Atlantic. Where are you going to be as a seed?
9 or 10 if I'm just being straight up.
They're trying
and
to
it's a
avoid
disappointment,
that.
but that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, but you know what? Me being the glass half full guy, I look at, you go take care of those, you get your quad 1 wins, and then all of a sudden, like I said before, Ole Miss doesn't sting quite as bad.
Those are tough teams, like
Oh,
Texas
I
A&M,
know. I'm not saying
Clemson,
you're
Virginia.
gonna, but how many quad 1s are there?
There's
5?
6
There's
total
6
quad
left
ones
in the entire season.
And Florida Atlantic's
Like-
2 of them.
All right.
Exactly.
So maybe 3 of them if you play them in the conference championship game. You go win 5 or 6 of those, you're sitting pretty.
So,
I mean, I'm not saying it's easier said than done, but who knows?
okay.
And
so-
I agree with Tim. Just to put that out there, they've got 6 games left in the non-conference. And I'm not saying it's likely or whatever, but if they win the next 6, nobody's thinking about Ole Miss. That's done. You ball that up, throw it in the trash can. But Texas A&M's 15th in the net, Clemson's 18th,
Yeah.
Virginia is somewhere in the 20s. Those are very, very, very difficult games against teams that are going to be top 25 teams for most of the season.
okay.
And don't go losing to Austin Peay.
Don't go losing to Austin Peay. Right?
Don't go losing in Richmond, on Wednesday.
No,
If
you
they
can't lose that game. Okay, so what? I'm not asking the worst case scenario, but come December 31st, they will have played the 6 remaining non-conference games before they get into conference play. What will it take? I'm not asking for this to happen, but what would it take for us to be in panic mode?
Panic mode's a strong, just a strong set of words, right?
And here's what I mean by panic mode. Panic mode knowing that you're going to be stuck again in an 8-9 game or maybe even a 10 seed.
Okay, so we're not talking about NIT bound or missing
No.
We're talking about back where they've always been.
But right now, nobody's
Like 8-9.
arguing this is an NCAA tournament team. Nobody is arguing that this is not a really good team.
And nobody should be.
That
Yes.
could go far. Nobody is arguing this. What we're arguing right now is they got 6 more non-conference games. And as Tim said, you forget about that Ole Miss loss if you can get on a run. But what would be the opposite?
I think I'll start here. I think you got to go at least 4-2.
Okay.
That's
That's what I'm asking
non-negotiable.
for.
Anything less than 4-2, and you're looking at, 8, 9, maybe 10. And even 4-2, depending on, how these
Depending
teams shake
on
out.
who those 2 losses are, and who those 4 wins
We've
are.
seen
yes.
Texas A&M now lose to Florida Atlantic. They lost the other day. I forgot who they dropped one to. Virginia. Virginia is who they dropped one to. So, if some of these teams take bad losses, which does happen in college basketball, then that 4-2 is not sitting pretty. We thought Arkansas was going to be a statement victory. I thought Arkansas was going to be a big time
So
win
did I.
ahead of the season. I had Arkansas in my Final Four, for crying out loud, ahead of the season.
So Tim, how should we be looking at Memphis right now? They have wins at Missouri. They have wins, obviously, over Michigan, Arkansas, and the Bahamas. They got a loss to Villanova where they played horribly in the first half but played much better in the second half. And then a tough loss against Ole Miss where they dominated but ended up losing. So right now, how do we look at this Memphis basketball team?
Yeah, you're not, you're not a top 25 team if you're Memphis, and you don't deserve to be. You're nowhere near the end of the world. You probably came out of the Bahamas, even though the Villanova loss was ugly, better than you might have anticipated going into the season based on what everybody thought those other teams were before you played them, Michigan especially. Same thing with Missouri. And yeah, I think you live with what you have and then you look at the rest. I love the fact that earlier Will Wade name came up because Will Wade has, and you really gotta do some extensive Googling on this. You do Will Wade Quad 1 rant, Louisiana Bob Marlin, and you will pull up one of the all-time great Quad 1 rants that Will Wade went on 2018 NIT game before they played, and then after they played the Raging Cajuns. And oh man, they got after the game they had to be separated on the floor. Bob Marlin, the Cajuns coach, and Will Wade, and it was all over because Bob Marlin went off beforehand about LSU not being willing to schedule the Raging Cajuns, and Will Wade's like, all we care about here is Quad 1 games. Why would we go schedule somebody like that? And they just went at it. And the irony now is, as Parth also mentioned the school name, Will Wade, after getting caught with his hand in the cookie jar
we know what happened.
at LSU, is
McNeese.
At McNeese, which doesn't play a lot of Quad 1 games.
But
Which
beat
beat
VCU.
VCU. Yeah, I was going to say.
The next game for Memphis.
Life comes full circle.
All right, what has to be fixed or revamped for this Tigers team to be clicking on all cylinders?
I think the offense has to look more cohesive. I mean, we've talked about this. They've talked about this on sports radio in this town. Like, it's looked like it's his turn. David Jones. Oh, okay, it's Quinterly's turn.
Right.
Okay, it's Caleb Mills. It can't be that, right? Because David Jones is not going to give you 36 every night. Nobody can in college basketball. You've got to figure out a way to run plays, be patient, and kind of have a more by committee approach in scoring. So that's one. 3-point defense. We've talked about that. That's been atrocious. For 4 straight games now. That can't happen anymore. And rebounding has to continue at the level that they just did it in Oxford and the level they've done it before, at Mizzou.
Tim, would you add anything?
I still love Quinterly, but Quinterly being more cognizant of who's around him, as tempting as it is to want to, take it into your own hands at the end. He's got a lot around him. The Jordan Brown factor, we went over that quite a bit. And yeah, feel free to throw a zone out there once in a while.
All right, final thing. Mike Williams.
Wait, and an addendum. Figure out how to inbounds the ball.
Has that been a struggle? Like, I haven't
Well,
really
it was
noticed.
a problem in, what was the game where...
It was one of those...
One of the games in the Bahamas
Yeah.
where Jaden threw it in the corner to Caleb Mills. He was double-teamed.
Yeah,
that's a problem.
When he had not one but 2 guys in the middle of the court, at least one of who easily would have been open with the screen.
Right.
And
Okay.
then there was one play, and I forget which one. There was one in Ole Miss, too, where it was like, what?
I do remember it being an issue one time. I think the Bahamas is what I'm recalling. Yeah. Ole Miss, it may have happened to. I may have been typing my story or whatever the case may be. Question for you guys though: do you see Penny making a starting lineup change? That gets talked about all the time. Penny's quick to kind of adjust things and tweak things when it comes to starting five. Look, I'd be in. You already know where I'm going.
I know.
And Tim might know where I'm going as well.
Say it.
It's time for Malco to start. It is time for Malcolm Dandridge to start.
But he made the comments. You guys were there in Oxford. Didn't you just said it earlier that he made the comments that he has to start doing a better job of the guys getting Jordan Brown going, get him the ball and all that. If that's the case, would he start Malco? You talk about a guy going into not in the doghouse because he's doing something bad, but kind of like putting him into a sulking situation where he's like, wow, they don't believe in me anymore.
Jordan Brown had a little bit of foul trouble when he was at Louisiana as well in the Sun Belt. Mm-hmm. When I actually asked the question, I use the word protect. One way you protect a guy is you start Malco and you bring in Jordan Brown a little bit later, and that way you're not picking up that second foul at the 18:37 mark. And maybe, Jordan Brown's able to watch a little bit and then get in the flow of game a little bit more without being, DeAndre Williams version 2.0.
They did that the first couple of games of the year. Yeah. Couple of games of the year, Malco started.
They did. And Penny said, I asked him during a press conference, like, hey, is that because Caleb Mills and Caleb Mills and Jordan Brown, did they do something wrong? Like, is that a punishment? And he denied it then, but then he went back and said later, a couple weeks later, after he switched the lineup again, that he wanted more energy out of those guys. And, I think he used the word, sometimes you got to shock these kids. And I think that's what he was trying to do.
All those coaches will tell you it doesn't matter who starts. It's who you have on the floor at the end of the game. So
coach talk, right? Coach speak though. I mean, is there something, there is something to that. But
just make sure at the end of the game that David Jones not only is on the floor, but he gets the basketball. That'll help. That'll go a long way.
That would help.
That would go a long way.
One thing to add about Jordan Brown, I don't think it's just been the foul trouble, right? Like this guy's getting cooked in pick and roll. This guy is not able to finish layups. I think the first shot of the game against Ole Miss, if I'm not mistaken, was a Jordan Brown smoked layup, and we've seen that numerous times through 7 games.
Damn ball, right?
What's going on?
Go ahead. He looks like he's playing in molasses, but don't get me started with Jordan Brown.
Last time you dunked the ball?
Never. But I'm also not 6'10", 6'11", whatever he is. All right. You heard me say it earlier. Final topic, Mikey Williams. We now have more clarity on what's going on with his legal situation. It's interesting. I brought up Mikey. Well, somebody texted into my radio show this morning. Today's Monday. And I had a defense attorney call in to explain because I don't know what it all means. But he is not a convicted felon right now, even though there's a one felony charge. It was all lumped in together. There's one felony charge. It will become a misdemeanor if he does all the things that he's supposed to be doing as far as going to gun classes and anger management stuff and all that. But this defense attorney said right now, because of the legal stuff and all that, he is not what did I just say?
Convicted felon.
Convicted felon. So now the person asks, should Penny add him to the roster? And I said, no, they shouldn't add him. Of course not. No, they shouldn't add him to the roster because, first of all, this team has been together now for 3 months. You're all of a sudden going to throw in this kid? That's number one. Number two, let him get everything straightened out in his life. Maybe next season, if he decides he's not going to go to Australia or try to play pro somewhere, then maybe if it is a misdemeanor, he can certainly play for Memphis. I would imagine that will not prevent him from being able to play. But I think that would be a major mistake, Tim. Let me start with you. If all of a sudden Penny, who has supported him and continues to support Mikey, turned around and added him to the roster for the spring semester.
My guess is that there will ultimately be a decision from somewhere above Penny that he has to go through the process. He has to reach the point in August where he made it through without any further problem and the felony gets knocked down to the misdemeanor. Then you bring him back, not even early in the summer, you bring him back late in the summer, or maybe bring him back early in the summer and you just kind of keep an eye out for him. Now, there might be an argument made that he'll be better off and have a better opportunity to not go wayward if he comes in between semesters and they're able to keep an eye on him more. And then if you do that, maybe you certainly don't play him, but you redshirt him, but at least you're able to take him under your wings, get him heading in the right direction. I think that's a tough sell because at this point, it still technically has not been knocked down to a misdemeanor yet.
Right. I would imagine the things he has to do, according to the court,
In California.
has to happen in California.
Yeah, I think so. The lawyer did tell me that there's no travel restrictions, so he can travel to Memphis.
Can he live in Memphis, though?
That part I'm not sure about, if I'm being honest with you, and I don't even know if the stuff that he has to do, which includes 80 hours community service, cognitive behavioral therapy, gun classes, anger management class, all this stuff that's kind of this package. I'm not sure if that has to be in the state of California. You may very well have a point there. Man, I can't believe we're talking. Like, I can believe it because Penny's, had this kid's back from day one.
He's never shot it down, Penny, so that's why it's still a conversation piece.
But you know what? Penny earlier, I think it was late summer before the season started, he said that I had asked him, like, hey, do you think you sticking by this kid, does that affect the image of your program that you've worked very hard to build over the past 5.5, 6 years? And, because every time you type in Mikey Williams in Google, what comes up? Memphis signee, Tigers. Like, he is associated. The word shooting and Mikey Williams and Memphis are all lumped together on the internet, on Twitter, on Facebook, whatever. So Penny kind of said no. He said he hasn't been charged with anything yet. He's innocent until proven guilty. Well, yeah. I mean, in August, if he gets that down to a misdemeanor, I guess technically
convicted of anything yet. You said
yes. Penny used the word charged, but he meant convicted. Right. Yeah, I get what you're saying. But look, right now he still has that felony charge, and even if he gets it knocked down to a misdemeanor, at no point has anybody said, not the lawyer, not Mikey, not Penny, has anybody ever said, hey, Mikey didn't shoot at the car? Mikey shot at a vehicle. That part does not change.
No, that doesn't change, but my prediction is this. If it is a misdemeanor and this kid wants to come next year to play for Memphis, not try to turn pro, and as long as he doesn't do anything else stupid, which is possible before then, I'm telling you this kid's going to be on the team next year.
I believe you. Is it a good idea? No.
I'm not saying it is, but
I think the likelihood of that is very high because you don't stick with them as much as you have if that was not your intention.
And look at your reputation on the line because of this kid. That's loyalty. Sometimes loyalty to a fault. But that's something we'll examine in the months to come. Sure. We'll see what happens as far as that is concerned. But I can't imagine he'll be a part of the team this year. Great stuff, Parth. Thank you so much. Safe travels to Richmond.
Yeah, it should be fun. I'm looking forward to it, and this was fun as always.
It's the old Richmond, then to College Station. You ever do that trip?
That's not exactly the Dominican and the Bahamas.
It is not.
It is not, no.
I've never been to College Station. I have been to Richmond.
I've been to College Station. Actually, College Station, they got a great Long John Silver's.
Long John Silver's?
I don't know if it's in Bryan or in College Station. It might be right on the border there.
Is that a 5-star restaurant? Never heard of that. Long John Silver's.
No, but you can get a 5-piece of the best fried chicken in the world.
Richmond, by the way, great city. Enjoy yourself. Thank you, Parth.
I appreciate it.
Tim,
Thanks,
as always, thank you, my friend. Appreciate it. That'll do it for us this week here on the Daily Memphian Tigers Podcast with Greg Gaston. Be sure to check out our other podcasts, the Daily Memphian's Food Podcast, Sound Bites. It's hosted by Chris Harrington and Holly Whitfield. The Sidebar with Eric Barnes is about arts, culture, and everything in between. And the Grizzlies Podcast is also hosted by Chris Harrington with Drew Hill. All of our podcasts are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find podcasts. Take care until next time.